Nestled in the heart of a vast shadowy forest, the small town of Hollow Creek was a place where time seemed to stand still. The town was tranquil and serene, its residents living simple lives, farming the fertile land and raising their families. Yet beneath the surface of this peaceful community lay a history buried in fear, a secret whispered in hushed tones, an ancient evil that had once terrorized the land. It was a story so dreadful that the town's elders refused to speak of it except in the most desperate of times. On the outskirts of Hollow Creek stood an old mansion, abandoned and forgotten by all but the most daring souls. The mansion had once been a place of prosperity, built by a wealthy family many generations ago. But over time, the family disappeared, leaving only the bones of a crumbling estate. Its walls, thick with ivy and age, stood as silent witnesses to the terror that had once reigned there. The mansion was said to be cursed. Villagers spoke of a dark figure, a bloodthirsty demon, who had once called the mansion home. The creature was known as the Bloodthirsty Spectre, a malevolent spirit that fed on the blood of the innocent. According to legend, the demon had been vanquished long ago by a powerful priest, but the mansion was never truly empty. The demon's restless spirit lingered, waiting for an opportunity to rise again. For years, the mansion had stood silent, untouched by the hands of time, and the people of Hollow Creek had learned to live in its shadow. Yet, as the years passed, strange events began to occur, ominous signs that the evil that once lived there was not gone after all. It all began one cold, moonlit night. The townspeople had gathered for a small festival in the town square, celebrating the harvest season. The air was crisp with the scent of autumn, and the sound of laughter echoed in the streets. Yet, even in this moment of joy, a sense of unease settled over the town. The winds howled through the trees, and a sudden chill seemed to creep into every corner. As the night deepened, the first strange occurrence took place. The village dogs, usually loyal and protective, began to bark furiously at something unseen in the darkness. They cowered, growling and whimpering, their eyes wide with terror. At the same time, people reported hearing distant, eerie noises coming from the direction of the old mansion. Some said it was the sound of chains rattling, others insisted they heard guttural growls carried on the wind. But the most chilling discovery came the next morning. People began to notice bloodstains on their doorsteps, and strange claw-like marks scratched into their wooden doors. Livestock began to disappear overnight. Cattle, sheep, and even the family pets were found missing. Their bodies never recovered. Whispers of the bloodthirsty specter's return spread through the village like wildfire. The townspeople grew increasingly fearful. The elders, remembering the dark history of the mansion, gathered in secret to discuss the ominous signs. They knew what it meant. The specter had returned, and it would stop at nothing to quench its unrelenting thirst for blood. The villagers were helpless. No one knew how to stop the demon once it had awakened. In a humble cottage at the edge of the village, the Miller family lived quietly. James Miller, a hardworking farmer, his wife Sarah, and their 10-year-old son Ethan had no idea of the terror that was unfolding in the town. The Millers were kind, good-hearted people, known for their generosity and sense of community. Ethan was their only child, a bright, curious boy who had a natural talent for reading and a love for adventure. On the night of the full moon, as the village prepared for the upcoming harvest festival, strange things began happening near the Miller household. The winds picked up, howling through the trees, and a cold chill settled over the village. Inside the Miller home, the family slept soundly, unaware of the evil creeping closer. Ethan awoke in the middle of the night, feeling an unexplainable sense of dread. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt as though something was watching him. His breath caught in his throat as he heard a faint whisper, low, guttural, and almost inhuman. He tried to call out, but his voice caught in his throat. Fear gripped Ethan as he saw a shadow moving in the doorway of his room. It was a tall, dark figure, with eyes glowing like fiery coals. The bloodthirsty specter had found its next victim. Before Ethan could scream, the demon reached out with long, bony fingers and grasped him by the arm. The last thing he heard was the cold whisper of the demon's voice. "Your blood will satisfy my hunger." And then everything went black. The next morning, James and Sarah awoke to an eerie silence in their home. Ethan's bed was empty. Panic immediately set in as they searched the house, calling his name, but there was no answer. The wind had stopped howling, and the sun had risen, casting a cold light over the town. When they reached the door, they found the bloodstains, smears of dark red that led away from their home and into the forest. James ran outside, shouting for his son, but there was no sign of Ethan. The villagers gathered, and soon the horrible truth became clear. The bloodthirsty specter had claimed another victim. The village was once again under the demon's curse. As the days passed, rumors began to spread. Some villagers claimed to hear Ethan's voice calling out from the mansion. Others said they saw his shadow flickering in the windows. But all these were illusions, the work of the demon, which feasted on the fear of the living. In the days that followed, the town was consumed by fear. People stayed indoors at night, afraid to venture near the old mansion. The once thriving village seemed to fall into a state of paralysis, its people terrified and mourning the loss of young Ethan. Father Gabriel, the town's priest, knew that something had to be done. He had studied the old texts, the legends passed down from the generations before, and he knew that the specter could only be defeated by a powerful ritual. But there was a price. A sacrifice that could either save the town or condemn it to eternal darkness. Father Gabriel called a meeting with the villagers, explaining the ritual that had been used to imprison the demon many years ago. However, there was one catch. The ritual had to be performed within the mansion itself, where the specter's power was strongest. The priest warned that anyone who attempted the ritual would be putting their life at risk. James, whose grief and anger had consumed him, stepped forward. "I will go," he said, his voice shaking with both fear and determination. "I will do whatever it takes to avenge my son." Father Gabriel hesitated, knowing the dangers involved. "This will not be easy, James. If you fail, your soul will belong to the specter as well." But James was resolute. He could not bear the thought of his son's soul being trapped by the demon. With the priest's blessing, he set out that night carrying the sacred materials needed for the ritual. The mansion loomed ahead as James approached, its silhouette dark against the moonlit sky. The winds howled once again, but this time it wasn't the wind that made his blood run cold. It was the sense of evil that seemed to hang in the air, thick and suffocating. The doors of the mansion creaked open as he stepped inside. The air inside was deathly still, and the cold seemed to cut through him like a knife. Every step James took echoed through the dark, empty halls. As he made his way deeper into the mansion, he could hear faint whispers, his son's voice calling to him, "Dad, help me." But James knew it wasn't Ethan. It was the demon's trick, a last attempt to break his resolve. He ignored the voice and continued on, moving toward the sanctum sanctorum at the heart of the mansion. As James reached the center of the mansion, a shadow moved toward him. A massive black figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing red like burning embers. The specter had come to stop him. "Your son's soul will never be freed," the demon hissed. "You are too weak to defeat me." But James was not afraid. With a prayer on his lips, he placed the ritual materials in the center of the room. As soon as he did, the mansion began to tremble, the walls cracking as the specter let out an ear-splitting scream. The ground beneath James's feet began to shake, but he stood firm, holding his ground. He pulled out the sacred talisman given to him by Father Gabriel and placed it on the ground. A blinding light filled the room, and with a final blood-curdling scream, the bloodthirsty specter vanished into nothingness. James collapsed to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The mansion was silent. The demon was gone. The villagers watched from a distance, waiting for any sign of James's return. As the smoke cleared and the mansion grew quiet, they knew the demon had been defeated. James had succeeded. But the price had been high. When James returned to the village, he was a broken man. His son was gone, and his wife Sarah had lost the will to live. Overcome with grief, she passed away soon after, her heart shattered by the loss of her son. Though the town was free from the bloodthirsty specter's grip, the loss of Ethan and Sarah left a hole in the hearts of the villagers. In the years that followed, the mansion was left to rot, a hollow reminder of the terror that had once consumed the town. The people built a shrine where the mansion had stood, a place to honor the sacrifices made by James and his family. But even as life slowly returned to normal in Hollow Creek, a shadow still lingered over the town. The memory of the specter's reign of terror would never be forgotten. Years passed, and the story of the bloodthirsty specter became a tale told to children by their elders. The new generation of Hollow Creek had grown up hearing the stories, but they did not truly understand the fear that once gripped the village. They considered it just a ghost story, nothing more. One such young man named Daniel was known for his fearless nature. He laughed off the stories of the specter, believing them to be mere superstition. One night, while his friends sat around a campfire, he made a bold proclamation. "I'm going to the old mansion," he said with a grin. "There's nothing to be afraid of, it's just a house." His friends tried to warn him, but Daniel was determined to prove them wrong. Under the cover of darkness, he set off toward the ruins of the mansion. As he approached the mansion, a cold wind began to blow. The air grew thick with the scent of decay. Daniel pushed forward, laughing to himself. But as he stepped through the broken doors, he felt a sudden chill run down his spine. A deep guttural laugh echoed from the darkness. Daniel froze. The bloodthirsty specter had returned. The villagers of Hollow Creek were once again gripped by terror. After the tragic loss of Daniel, the once peaceful town had fallen into a state of despair. Fear spread like wildfires. People locked their doors at night and whispered of the demon's return. It seemed that no matter how many sacrifices were made, the bloodthirsty specter always found a way to rise again. Father Gabriel, now an elderly man, was the only one who seemed to know how to stop it once and for all. He gathered the town's remaining elders and spoke of the ancient texts hidden deep within the town's oldest temple. The text contained the secret to permanently destroying the specter, but the ritual described in those pages was unlike anything the village had ever attempted. The priest and a group of the most trusted villagers set out for the temple that night, determined to find a way to end the demon's terror. The journey was not an easy one, for the temple was deep within the forest, hidden from view. As they approached, the air grew thick with the weight of history, and an eerie silence fell over the trees. Father Gabriel stepped into the ancient temple, its walls covered with symbols and markings that had not been seen for centuries. The villagers watched as he slowly opened a weathered book, its pages yellowed with age. The text, written in an old language that few could understand, spoke of the bloodthirsty specter's origins, the curse that had created it, and the only way to truly destroy it. The specter can only be vanquished by a selfless sacrifice, Father Gabriel muttered under his breath. A soul bound by love and pain, who offers themselves willingly to break the demon's curse forever. The ritual must take place in the heart of the mansion, where the demon's power is strongest. The villagers stared at one another in disbelief. The only way to end the specter's reign of terror was for someone to give up their life without hesitation. The question now was, who would be willing to make such a sacrifice? The town had seen too much tragedy. The death of Ethan, the sorrow of Sarah, the fear that plagued every family in Hollow Creek. How could anyone ask another to give their life? Yet the people knew that without this final act, their town would be doomed forever. Raghu's mother, the woman who had already endured the loss of her son, stood in the back of the room, her face filled with quiet resolve. Her heart ached with the loss of her child, but she had long ago understood the cost of peace. "I will do it," she said softly, stepping forward. Her voice carried the weight of a mother's love and the pain of knowing that her sacrifice was the final piece needed to save Hollow Creek. The villagers were stunned. Raghu's mother had already lost so much, but she was willing to give everything to save her home. Father Gabriel looked at her, his heart heavy with both gratitude and sorrow. "Are you sure, my child?" he asked gently. "I have lost my son. If my sacrifice can bring peace to this village and prevent further bloodshed, I will offer myself willingly," she said, her voice unwavering. And so the ritual was set. The villagers gathered in the town square, preparing to perform the sacred ceremony. The air felt heavy with anticipation as Father Gabriel and the villagers prepared the necessary elements of the ritual. The ceremony would take place at the old mansion, the place where the specter's evil had first been unleashed. Raghu's mother, though broken by grief, moved with a sense of purpose. She knew that she would never see her village again, but she also knew that her death would give Hollow Creek the chance to finally be free from the demon's curse. The night was cold and silent as the villagers made their way to the mansion. The once terrifying building now stood quietly in the moonlight, but its malevolent energy still lingered in the air. As they entered the mansion, the temperature dropped dramatically and the floorboards groaned under their weight. It was as if the house itself was alive, sensing the impending confrontation. Father Gabriel led the group into the heart of the mansion, where the sanctum stood, where the specter's power had been the strongest. The walls trembled as Raghu's mother stood at the center of the room, her face calm and resolute. The priest began to chant the ancient incantations from the old texts, his voice carrying through the mansion. The villagers formed a circle around Raghu's mother, each person silently praying for her bravery and sacrifice. As the final words of the chant echoed in the air, the ground shook violently. A dark shadow appeared in the doorway. The bloodthirsty specter had arrived. Its glowing red eyes pierced the darkness, its figure looming larger than before. "You cannot stop me," the demon growled, its voice deep and menacing. "I am eternal. You are all fools to think you can destroy me." But Raghu's mother did not flinch. She stood her ground, her eyes locked with the demons. She raised her arms high and the final words of the ritual left her lips. "I offer my life to end your reign of terror," she said, her voice steady. "May my sacrifice bring peace to my people." As the words left her mouth, the mansion trembled once more, and a blinding light filled the room. The specter screeched in agony as the light grew brighter, surrounding Raghu's mother in a powerful aura. Her body glowed with an otherworldly radiance, and as the final word of the incantation was spoken, she collapsed to the floor, her body consumed by the light. The demon's red eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, it seemed to hesitate. Then, with a final agonizing scream, it was consumed by the light. The mansion shook violently, the walls cracking, as the specter's power was torn from it, its soul ripped away forever. When the light faded, the mansion stood silent. Raghu's mother was gone, her body reduced to ash, but the demon's presence was no more. The town of Hollow Creek was finally free. The villagers stood in stunned silence. The air was still, the oppressive weight of fear lifted. The bloodthirsty specter was gone, its curse broken forever. But the price of freedom had been steep. Raghu's mother had given everything for her village. She had sacrificed her own life, not only for the safety of her people, but for the chance to finally see the terror end. Her bravery had sealed the demon's fate and ensured that Hollow Creek would never again live in fear. In the days that followed, the villagers mourned her sacrifice. A monument was erected in her honor at the site of the mansion, and every year the people of Hollow Creek gathered to remember her bravery. They celebrated the peace she had brought them, the peace that had been so hard won. The old mansion, once a place of terror, was left in ruins. It was no longer a symbol of fear, but a reminder of the power of sacrifice and courage. The villagers no longer feared it. They knew that as long as they remembered the sacrifices made by Raghu's mother, the demon would never return. The children of Hollow Creek grew up hearing the tale of the bloodthirsty specter. But to them it was just that, a tale, a story of the past. The villagers taught their children the importance of courage and selflessness, and they made sure that the next generation would never forget the price of peace. And so Hollow Creek flourished. The land became fertile once more, and the people rebuilt their lives, never again haunted by the shadow of the specter. The memory of Raghu's mother's sacrifice lived on in the hearts of all who called Hollow Creek home. The curse had finally been broken and the village was free. But the lesson remained. True peace comes only when we face our fears and make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. And thus Hollow Creek moved forward into a bright future, with the courage and love of one woman lighting the way.